in the narrow sense of it, although I see that we are somewhat governed here by the semiology of symbolism which floats above our heads. Healy's school and Klimt, hopefully, will be governing what I have to say. Klimt, of course, was working very much at that time of synthesis, when so much then as now was bubbling, happening in culture and in science in Vienna. So I come to you humbly as an artist, but in a sense it's rather like coming home and rather like paying some debts, because in the very early 60s I became very much enamored, I suppose would be the correct word, by the work, the writings of Norbert Wiener and then Ross Ashley. And then I had the good fortune to meet, while I was developing an art school in London, Ealing, Gordon Pass, whose charisma and ability to communicate, I'm sure, are very, very complex ideas to students, to art students, and to artists, was instrumental in London, certainly, in creating a whole ethos of what one might call systems art. It was at the level of very simple systems, as you would readily understand, since we were all artists. In fact, at that time, art was seen, theoretically, in rather simple terms. The issues seemed to be very straightforward. In the 60s, what was at work at that time was what is now known, and is then known, of course, as modernism. And modernism represented the other to classical art, to that great development of image and language, visual image and language, which represents the Western tradition in culture. Modernism was set up in opposition to that tradition. And of course I will want to talk a little bit about the nature of modernism. The issues seem to be so straightforward in those days. Abstract art versus non-representative art versus figurative art. To be figurative was bad in some camps, to be modern was good in others, and vice versa. And the battle lines were pretty clearly, pretty well drawn. It's a time of simple systems, and so it wasn't too difficult to try to relate what was happening in the world of art, the world of art objects, to this, for us, new field of systems and systems theory and cybernetics. But now, in the last 10 or 15 years, a great deal of turbulence in the system is being recognized. The tenets of modernism have been overturned. And there is great confusion, there is great uncertainty, and there's also great energy, great experimentation. And all of this turbulence, all of this change which is currently taking place in art, and seems equally to be taking place in literature, and in music, and in philosophy, and I dare say in other sciences also, can be represented in your terms, if I may say that, as very, very complex systems. And the name that we give to this cultural shift that seems to be taking place, to this uncertainty and confusion and great energy, is postmodernism. Postmodernism isn't a very happy term. It seems to suggest that we don't really know what we're looking at and what we're talking about. I have to say, that's true in art development. All we do know is that we're looking at a radical shift, a radical change of position, of viewpoint, of attitude, of process, of intention. And it stands in quite stark contrast to the simple, apparently straightforward issues of modernism in art. So that's partly my subject today. In its itself a very complicated one, and one which I think one has to be quite rash to undertake if one intend to be in any way comprehensive. I can't possibly be within the limits of an hour or so to be comprehensively reviewing what is happening in postmodern art, but I will attempt to sketch out the field as best I can. But there's a further complication. I'm in the position of then relating postmodernist art to cybernetics and to systems theory. Now that is quite a huge undertaking, and naturally it's quite a complex undertaking, and I will attempt to do that as best I can. But I must say that one of the other reasons that I'm so particularly glad to be here today is not only to, as it were, return that, to pay on that debt, which I feel, and many artists that I'm associated with in Europe, the United States, feel towards your field, towards the insights that systems theory, that systems approach, that cybernetics has provided to us as artists as a way of understanding what we are doing, what we're attempting to do. Not only to pay that debt, but also, hopefully, to put it to you that some kind of more formal connection might be made between many artists in the many countries that you come from, between artists and systems scientists. A few months ago I was at a UNESCO conference which was addressed by artists and art theorists, people who talk about art, from many countries, on the left and right, in the west and east. And it became apparent to us, one of the conclusions of the meeting was, it's absolutely fundamentally essential now that we make whatever links we possibly can with scientists in all fields. In the social sciences and physical sciences, that we make links as best we can for a number of reasons. One is that we're reaching the edge of the image. We're reaching the edge of our capacity to exploit the image. We want to move further into an understanding of the potential of the image. And you use the image in ways that we do not. And it's conceivable that we could give something back. There could be some reciprocity in that we have some insights into the use of the image with which you are not entirely familiar. In many ways, one could say this is the age of the image. Although literary critics and some philosophers who seem to have become literary critics in the postmodern, post-structuralist field would want to argue that the text is undergoing a sort of renewal and is now quite vigorous and being seen in another light. I want to talk a little bit about the text. But the image seems to have this very special quality of both all-at-onceness, the mosaic field, and also providing that necessary opportunity for the viewer to take what he or she will from the information which is presented. The mosaic field is both all at once in terms of understanding, representation, recognition, and also provides, because of its openness, an opportunity for the viewer, for the reader, to enter into it at different points of entry, to create different patterns of movement across the field. Unlike our familiar reading of the text, which is essentially linear,